Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. If you'd like to know more about my knitwear designs, please check in the description below. There you will find a link to my Ravelry designer page where you can see all of the patterns I have available for you to get and knit up for yourself. Also in the description below, you will find a link to the Watch Barbara Knits Facebook group. We'd love to have you come over and join us so we can continue the conversations that we start here on the YouTube channel. Today, this is a video I've been trying to make for a little while, but things have been a little crazy. It is time. It's postcard time. I want to tell each and every one of you who have sent me a postcard, I am overjoyed every time I get one in my PO box. It just makes me so happy and it's fun to get, and I have been saving them all, and I'm a little bit behind because things happened, but we're going to do this. So what this is my Ask Me Anything knitting edition, and what it is y'all can take pen or pencil and apply it to a postcard and send me questions. In general, I prefer that they be knitting based questions, but as long as it's not too personal, I will do my best to answer whatever you might come up with. And it is super fun to see the postcards. And you know, some people just find like vintage postcards. It doesn't even have to be a postcard from where you are. And I even have one that's not even a postcard at all. It's just an index card. Well, I mean, it is a postcard because look, it's a postcard, but it is not what one would normally think of when they think of a postcard, but that is just fine because it gets there and I appreciate it. If you would like to send me your question, check in the description below and there you will find my P.O. box, and I'll probably put it up here on the screen, and I would love to hear from y'all. But let's get to answering some questions. So I'm going to start with these two because they're from the same person, which thank you so much for sending them. These are both from Kathy. I'm just going to say Kathy Z, and because I don't want to say your last name, and also there's no way I can pronounce this. There are two Z's in this name, and that is just super exciting. So we have one, which is the Marblehead Lighthouse, which is the oldest light in continuous operation on the Great Lakes. Located at the entrance to Sandusky Bay in Ohio. The tower stands 65 feet tall. So that is super cool. And then also, did you know that the state bird of Ohio is a cardinal? Interestingly enough, I believe it's also the state bird of Indiana. I don't know. I just remember seeing a lot of cardinals. I grew up in Indiana, so that I see. So let's start off with the birdie one. And so, have you been to Ohio? If so, where? Yes, I have been to Ohio. As I said, I grew up in southern Indiana. So when I was a little kid, we used to go to Kings Island, which was an amusement park, and that was a lot of fun. We moved away when I was a young teen, like 13 or 14. Since then, I have been back to Ohio. I came back and taught at a yarn store called Lamekins Hideaway. I believe it's in Hamilton, Ohio. And while I was there, the lovely lady I stayed with took me to Jungle Jim's, which was the most awesome grocery store on the face of the earth. And also TNNA, the National Needlework Association. The summer show is frequently in Ohio. So I have been to Columbus, and this summer I will be going to Cleveland for TNNA. So Ohio is awesome. I love the Skyline Chili, and they took me to an ice cream place. I think it was called Grater's or something like that. Also awesome. I've driven through, I think Cincinnati's real cool. When I drive through Cincinnati, they have a certain amount of, I believe it's called urban decay, but in a good way that I'm like, wow, that would make a great photography backdrop. So Ohio sounds like lots of fun. And I anticipate going back. Well, I'm going to be there this summer. What did you want to be when you were a young girl? All kinds of things. There was a point in time I wanted to be a vet, but I'm allergic to cats and dogs and guinea pigs and chinchillas and hay. So pretty much everything. So that kind of didn't work out for me. And then for the longest time, I wanted to be an actress. I did a lot of musical theater and have a lot of singing, training in singing and acting. And I actually initially went to college for theater, but I was going to a very good school and they kept telling me that 99% of all actors are like unemployed. So I decided to go with something a little bit more employable, I guess is what it is. But, you know, did I ever think I would be doing this? That's going to be 100% no. Now, where do I buy my pretty tops? Well, thank you so much. Pretty much wherever I can find them. I predominantly shop at like Target, but I also go to Kohl's a lot. And I believe the one I have on came from TJ Maxx. For me, you know, I'm not a small lady. I mean, I am a small lady in that I'm short, but I'm not a small lady this direction. So a lot of it is, you know, what fits is where I go. So I'm not a huge fashionista, but I try to buy nice stuff. And thank you so much for that kind word. Have you been to the Needlefish Yarn Store in Venice? The owner is from Ohio. It is on my list. I have not yet been down there, but it is on my list and I can't wait to go. I did not know she was from Ohio, but when I do go, I will take this card with me and show it to the owner and hopefully it will open up a fun conversation. Now, okay, so those were just fun, not necessarily knitting relating things. Now, so here's another postcard just for fun and appreciation. I'm a big fan. Thank you so much. You run a daycare out of your home in Ohio and knit when I can and knit, crochet and knit when I can. My first grandchild is due any minute. Knitting baby thinks, oh, so much fun. So that babies are so much fun to knit for. It's like instant gratification and congratulations. And I can totally see running in a daycare and being able to knit a little bit, but I imagine you don't have too much because kids will just run you ragged. How did you find other knitting friends in your area? Now, in Atlanta, the way that I found knitting friends was through Ravelry. I went on Ravelry and looked up knitting in Atlanta, and through that I was able to find a group that met in my area. And I also found the Atlanta Knitting Guild. And so I searched for those types of things. And there was a very wide community of knitters in Atlanta, and it was fabulous. Here in Sarasota, it is one of the reasons why I actually took the job at A Good Yarn was to meet some people and meet new knitters. When I first got to Sarasota, I also looked for knitting guilds, and the closest one is the Bay Area Knitting Guild, and I joined their Facebook, and I actually taught for them, so I look forward to getting to know them better. You know, I think that most of us, as an older person, you know, as you get into your adult and late adulthood, making new friends as adults is hard, but I'm going to keep on pushing through and see what I can find. I've considered just randomly taking my knitting out for a walk and sitting around and see if anyone reacts. But my biggest contact has been through working at the yarn store and meeting a lot of absolutely lovely knitters. So thank you very much, Kathy Z, for both these postcards. Now the next one, look at that. Isn't it awesome? This is a sea lemon, Peltodorus nobilis, Monterey Beach, Caramel by the Sea, California. This is, I think, a sea slug. So, Dear Barbara, here's the postcard I've been promising. We live in San Jose, California, but like to spend time diving off the coast in the Monterey Bay area. The sea lemon, parentheses pictured, a type of nudibranch. I think nudibranch is just the funniest word. Ask your shop friends, there's at least one on the diorama in your shop tour. I went and looked at it, and there is indeed, is seen often in these waters. My husband took this picture of one I found on a dive last year. So my question, have you been scuba diving? Any thoughts on you and or your family doing so now that you are near the ocean? I was going to point you to a good instructor, but with your shop connections, you may already have access to one. I look forward to seeing more of your your wonderful creations. And this is from Celeste S. Celeste, thank you so much. And this is so cool. I didn't know that you could have a photo, a postcard made of your own photo. So that is super cool. I might do some Googling and find other resources for that. And so really cool. The owner of my yarn store, the husband is actually a diver, and they have this club called the Pearl Diver Club, where he is an underwater photographer when he is scuba diving, and he takes photos, and then they take those photos and send them to dyers and have custom colors dyed. And so there's this whole club that all the colorways are based on these photographs of underwater stuff, and I'm pretty sure there's a neuter branch in there. So that is super cool. You might want to look into it. Will I be diving? The answer is no. Not gonna happen. It's just not something that's ever really clicked for me. When I was a teenager, I went on a trip in the Keys with my sister who does scuba dive, and I was snorkeling and she was diving, and I was swimming, and I could see her swimming along, and then behind her and like up behind her was a barracuda following her the whole way, and it kind of scared the pants off of me. I am perfectly happy with the snorkeling part. I don't really have the urge to go any deeper. It's just not on my list of things to do. When it comes to dangerous kind of things, I'm very risk averse. Now, one thing we are doing that's very exciting to us since we've moved here is that both myself and my son are learning how to sail. Every Thursday, I go to the Sarasota Sailing Squadron, and I'm learning how to sail a sunfish, which is a tiny, tiny boat that only takes one person, and it's the kind that you have to sit on the side, and when you move your sail, you gotta like duck under it and stuff, and I'm really hope nobody ever takes a video of me doing it, because I'm the most ungraceful person on the face of the earth. But it is a lot of fun doing something so challenging this late in life. I never thought I'd be learning something completely and utterly new, and my son has taken to it like that, and he has joined the youth sailing group, and he is having a blast. So we mostly stay on top of the water or on the beach. Scuba diving is probably not in the cards anytime soon. Thank you for that fun question, and I managed to work a little knitting in there for the rest of y'all who are watching, and a cool neuter branch. Now, this super cool. See, it doesn't have to be a fancy postcard, although I do like the flower. He's super cute. Does it say what kind of flower it is? I think it's upside down. No, it does. It says something, but I can't read it. So, hi Barbara. I'm very new to knitting. I have made 2 cowls, 1 infinity scarf, some washcloths, and 6 pairs of socks. I wouldn't call that very new. When they talk about ease, what are they talking about? Also, why is gauge different in the round and flat knitting? I would love to knit a sweater. Should I try top down or bottom up? What sweater pattern would you suggest? I will put a link in the description below. I did do a top 5 sweaters I want to pretend to knit because, so Tina, I've never knit a sweater. I got to be straight with you. Well, an adult size sweater. I've knit a little kid sweater, and I've knit like tiny sweaters for bears, because that was a charity where we dressed bears. That's a big long story. So I'm afraid I don't have a particularly good suggestion for you for a sweater to start with. Hopefully maybe someone could comment in the comments below and give a suggestion, or if you come over and join Facebook and ask this question, other people who are more experienced sweater knitters can give you some suggestion. Top down versus bottom up, it's going to just be a matter of personal preference. So I'm afraid I can't help you with that too much, or maybe we can knit our first sweater together. Why is gauge different in the round versus flat knitting? So when you are knitting flat, and what we're talking about general is stockinette. When you're knitting flat, you are knitting the right side rows and purling the wrong side rows. And the vast majority of people, when they knit, their tension is different between their knit and their purl. It's just the way the thing works. It's just in general how your knitting goes. Everybody's tension is different when you're doing the different stitches. Now, some people it's more exaggerated. I know people who their purl tension is so much looser that they actually sometimes have to use different needle sizes coming back. So that can be frustrating. When you are knitting in the round and you're knitting stockinette, all you're doing is knitting. It's just knit, 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 knit. So it's at a more consistent tension. So that is the reason why knitting in the round versus knitting flat, you get different gauges. It's just the nature of how knitting is constructed. Now, if you're knitting, and if you would think if you're knitting garter, it wouldn't make a big deal, but the flip side, if you are knitting garter flat, you just knit all your sides. But to knit garter in the round, you have to knit one round and then purl one round. So you get the same issue with the difference in tension between your knit stitch and your purl stitch. Okay, ease. What are they talking about? Ease can be a very complex discussion. So ease, what they're talking about is how well something fits. So if you took like your chest measurement, and let's say it's 38. Mine's not. But let's just say. So if you put on a shirt that if you measured the circumference of the shirt itself was 38 inches in circumference, you would just have on something that had no ease. It is no bigger and no smaller than your actual measurement. If you have a 38-inch bust and you have a shirt that actually measures like 40 inches, then that garment has 2 inches of positive ease. What that means is that the diameter, the circumference diameter, we don't measure diameters of people. The circumference of the garment is actually larger than the circumference of the part of the body it is covering. So positive ease means that you have more fabric. So this has positive ease because you can see you've got this extra stuff here, so it doesn't fit, I probably shouldn't have done that, sorry. So it doesn't fit tight. So positive ease means more, that the dimension is larger than your actual dimension. Negative ease means that the circumference of whatever it is you're creating is actually smaller than your actual measurements. And things that frequently have negative ease are something like socks, where when it is flat is actually narrower than your, this is a wrist, but I was thinking like than your ankle or your thing. And frequently why things will have negative ease is to actually hold them onto your body. Like the brim of a hat typically is designed so when it's laying flat, it's going to be ribbing, so it's going to lay flat, and it's only going to be like 18 inches in circumference for your 21-inch head, and that's so it grabs on and your head or your foot or whatever stretches it out and keeps it put. So you have negative ease and then positive ease. Positive ease means that the actual measurements are larger than your measurements. Negative ease means that the actual measurements of the garment are smaller than your actual measurements. Positive ease is to give wiggle room. Negative ease is to keep it on your body. I hope that makes a little bit of sense for you. Thank you so much, Tina. Those were some excellent questions, and I hope that other people who maybe had those questions might do. And let me tell you, 6 pairs of socks, that is 3 more pairs of socks than I have made. I'm not much of a sock knitter. I love socks. I love people who knit socks, but not so much. But you give yourself more credit for being awesome. Okay, let's see here. So this is from Texas, obviously. Greetings from Texas, the Lone Star State. Look, we've got an armadillo, and I believe that's like a Texas bluebonnet, and we got ourselves a cow person. Very exciting. And we got like an oil derrick and some kind of tree I'm sure is significant. And I think that's the Alamo. And then some sort of deserty thing going on. And some water. I think Houston is the one on the water. Oops, focus. Dear Barbara, how do you compute the number of beads you will need for a project? I can figure out flat lace, 3 beads per repeat, 10 repeats per scarf, 30 beads. But something like Love Child gives me brain fees. Cindy R. Boring librarian on Ravelry. I don't know if there's such thing as a boring librarian. Every single librarian I've ever met has been absolutely fascinating. So I'm just going to put that out there. Thank you so much, Cindy. Okay. Not going to lie. If I am going to bead something like Love Child or the things that I've done, well, actually, like this is each to each. I literally pretty much buy way more than I think I'm going to need and just wing it. It takes a lot of math. What you would need to do if I really wanted to compute it out, what I would have to do is, so Love Child, the repeat in it is like, I think it's 4 or 5 stitches wide. And then you would have to sit down and look at the, cause it increases with every row and how many stitches you add per row. And there would be a spreadsheet. That is what I would have to do. I would have to create a spreadsheet and it would be ridiculously long. And what it would be is, so it would determine how many repeats it was going off and I'd have to add it in and then divide each beaded row. First, you'd have to take off the edge stitches and then divide each beaded row by the repeat and then figure that it would be a lot, just a lot of math is how that would have to happen. Again, this one, I knew that I was going to do this crazy, crazy amount of beading, and I just bought like a whole hank, and I weighed it, and then after I finished with it, I weighed it again to determine how much I used, and that is how I specify on the pattern, you know, I did this and the beads are X number per gram. So with big things like this, I don't even try to math it out from the beginning because it's very complex. But again, it's spreadsheet. It would be figuring out, you know, it is, I'm sorry, it is very difficult. And it just, there's no easy way to do it. I wish I could be, well, I'm being not helpful on several things. I wish I could be more helpful. And the thing is with Love Child, because it increases so many times, by the end you're doing so many repeats per row. I would actually literally have to lay out my finished Love Child and count the number of repeats. So buy more than you think you need and just be prepared to start a bead stash. It's really the only thing I've got for you. So that is an excellent question, and the answer is I make it up as I go along. It's very difficult to estimate. Oh, that wasn't a good answer. I'm sorry. Okay, so last postcard. This is from Williamsport. Beautiful sunset, and then I guess this is the same place but not sunsetty, and there's a baseball involved and a steamboat and a big carved Indian-y thing, so that's super cool. Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Oh, that is, yes, so the top left, a dramatic sunset, Williamsport, taken from Bald Eagle Mountain, forming the south rim of the Susquehanna River Valley. And then the same picture from Bald Mountain, but in the daytime. A game at Howard J. Lamont Stadium, a daytime being played at World Series Stadium. Well, that's cool. the Hiawatha Riverboat navigating the Susquehanna River, a hand-carved Indian bust located in Brandon Park. So a whole lot of American Indian, Native American terms. Seems like it's very rich a history in Williamsport. This is for Robin L. She told me not to pronounce the H in the last name, but I'm not going to pronounce your last name because I don't want to out you on the internet. But Robin, thank you so much. Welcome from Williamsport, Pennsylvania, home of Little League Baseball. Well, that explains why there's 2 baseball pictures on the top. Very cool. A city of rich history and beautiful views. My question, could you explain the difference between woolen and worsted spun yarn and what projects would be suitable for each? Love your podcast, never missed it. I've learned so much. Okay, so I left this one for last because it is a little bit complicated and I actually wrote myself notes to make sure that I cover it all. If you don't want to know a whole lot about worsted and woolen spun yarn, you should probably skip on now. So Robin, thank you so much for this question. Okay, so worsted, most of us when we think of worsted weight yarn, we think of it as a description of the weight of the yarn. Worsted versus DK versus fingering. This is not what we're talking about. This is worsted as the actual structure, the construction of the yarn. And we're talking about worsted versus woolen spun. Okay, so you can have a fingering weight worsted spun. It's like gauges. There's so many different multi-use terms in knitting. It's kind of ridiculous. So what it has a lot to do with, well, it's very complicated and you can get into very technical elements, but what it mostly has to do with is how the wool fibers are prepared and how they are spun. So a woolen spun yarn, they take the fibers and they card them. And after they card them, then they spin them. Carding removes all the stuff you don't like little twigs and everything. But carding just sort of fluffs up the fibers and you'll have long and short fibers and they're all kind of going every which way. So when they get spun, they're taking it directly, so they're all still kind of pointing and they put a twist in it, but they're all just kind of sticking out every which way. So that creates a yarn that has a almost rustic look to it. All those fibers kind of stick out and it's not smooth, and there's a lot of air. All those little fibers kinked and moving every direction hold a lot of air in them. So you get a lovely squishy yarn that is going to, it's going to bloom when it gets wet and it traps a lot of air. So it's going to be very, very warm. But because all those fibers are going every which way, it will have a higher tendency to pill and it's not going to be as strong as a worsted spun yarn. Now, a worsted spun yarn, the fiber is carded, but after it's carded, to get all the gunk out of it, it's then combed with these giant they're these big giant like spiky things. And what they're doing is they're combing them. And the combing removes the shorter fibers and it takes the longer remaining fiber and aligns them. Like this. So instead of it all going like bunky everywhere, they line up next to each other and they kind of pull out, and so they're only overlapping. So you have the longer fibers and they're all next to each other, and it really presses out a lot of the air. So it's not, and so then when it's spun, it makes a more dense yarn that is also it's got more strength because all of them are facing all the same way and they kind of lock together, and you get a dense, and it's spun, and it gives it more drape because they're all long and they're all flooping over. There's not as much air in them, so it's not going to bloom as much. It gives, because everything's all aligned in the same direction, it gives it more luster because when the light hits it, since everything's going the same way, the light bounces off like in the same way. So you see, whereas woolen spun, since everything's pointing every which way, when light hits it, it refracts off in every which way. So you get more of a matte appearance. Your worsted weight yarn is going to pill less than a woolen yarn, but again, it's not, because it doesn't have all that air trapped, it's not as warm. And what else? And there was no and. So worsted weight yarn is stronger. There's less pilling, and it has more drape. Your woolen spun yarn is more matte. It is warmer because it traps all the air. It's like a soft and fluffy thing. Now, what are they good for? Your worsted spun yarns are going to have better stitch definition, so they're really good for things like cables, where you really want the yarn to pop up and you want to see those individual stitches, where the fuzziness of woolen spun yarn is frequently preferred by people doing color work because the stitches aren't as defined. It really helps with creating the illusion of color work because the edges are kind of blurred, and so they all blend together and your color work kind of looks more like a solid color as opposed to being able to see each individual stitch. Woolen spun is not necessarily going to be as good for lace because the tension you put it under it when you try to block it open. I'm not saying you can't do it, but since it's got that fuzziness, you're not going to hold as crisp of the image of lace. They're two very different things. Both have their purposes, and one is not better or less, it's not a good versus bad kind of situation. They're just different. A lot of people really, really like woolen spun yarns. They give a much different texture. They're really fun in textures and color work, and they are going to make a warmer garment because of all the air it traps. Flip side, they are going to tend to pill a little bit more, and they're not quite as strong. Worsted spun yarn is going to have a much slicker, more defined look. It looks a little more, I hate to say the word, but it looks more finished, and it's going to have more drape. So most of the yarns you're going to see in a yarn store are going to be worsted spun. When you think of yarn, it's mostly worsted spun, but there are a lot of beautiful woolen spun yarns coming out in the market, and it's fun to play with both. So I don't know if that was more or less information than you were looking for, Robin, but that's what I got for you. So we've got all these amazing, that was the last one. Thank you to everyone who sent me a postcard. I really appreciate it. I also do want to mention to Wendy, I got yours. Thank you so much. It really, really brightened my day to receive this. But that's all I'm going to say about that. If you have questions for me, please go to my P.O. box. Send me a postcard. Ask me a question. I will save up. Hopefully we will accumulate enough for me to do another video in the very near future. If you like this video, please give it the thumbs up. Click that like button. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.